All right, 5th grade, you are in the room with Miss V right now. We're going to do some social studies. We're going to continue what we talked about yesterday. Okay, the colonists versus the king, part 2. Okay, so we talked about how the colonists were so upset with the king. They were very unhappy with the way that the king was leading them. They felt like he was making really bad decisions and kind of being a bully. Right? We talked about how he was kind of crazy. He did some really weird things. If you were able to see that video from Hamilton, you'll know that he is someone who's a little bit off his rocker. He's a little bit weird. Later in his life, he actually got put into a hospital because they thought that maybe there was something wrong with him. So the king is kind of a different person. So if you weren't able to see that video from Hamilton yesterday, I'm going to post that video here again today. Okay? And so if you are able to watch it, go ahead and watch it. I talked to Miss Schley. She said she tried to fix it. So hopefully you're able to watch it. It's obviously Hamilton. I love Hamilton. It's a great play. It's on Disney Plus. But it also shows kind of what the king was like. All right? That's the most important thing. So, first thing we got to do is who was the king of Britain? Let's remind ourselves who was the king of Britain. This was King George the Third. And when we do third, we'll do 3 uppercase I's. 1, 2, 3. King George the Third. Okay, King George the Third. Down here, we're going to put a picture. Okay, so we go over here. We'll do King George the Third. You can either find a picture of King George the Third as like a painting, like one of these. All right. Students in the other block, they found like some fan art of King George the Third. Great. You can do that too if you want. If you want to do King George the Third of Hamilton, you want to find a picture of the actor who plays King George the Third in the play, you can totally do that too. I am going to just take some fan art, I guess. Look at this one. It's kind of cool. It's like a clip art. Look, there's a sticker. It's kind of cool. It's $2.91. Pretty cool. All right, I'm going to copy this here. All right, King George the Third. All right, there you go. So you can find any picture that you want that kind of represents to you who King George the Third is. If it's a painting, a picture like this, or a picture from Hamilton, it's up to you. Okay. King George the Third, he was the king. He was the one who was bullying the colonists. Right. Now, we talked about yesterday 3 things that made the colonists very mad. So the first, the colonists were upset about the fact that they could not move into the Ohio River Valley, right? We talked about how that was very important for them. They really wanted to move over there, and the king said, that sounds really cool, but no, tough, right? So the colonists are very upset about that. The second thing, colonists were upset that king was over 4,000 miles away, right? He was doing all these really terrible things to them. He was making all these really bad decisions for them, and it didn't make sense. He was 4,000 miles away. Why did he care what they did, right? He's so far away. Shouldn't they be able to make their own decisions, right? So those are 2 reasons there. The Ohio River Valley, also because he's so far away. And the last thing, the colonists were upset about all of the taxes. Right? Colonists were so upset about all the taxes. Right? That was kind of the big thing. We talked about 3 different kinds of taxes that were put on the colonists. Okay? We're going to talk about one more today. But really, after today, what's going to happen when we get back together on Monday and we talk about social studies, things are going to really pick up and pretty much turn into a war. Okay? We just got done talking about a war. Unfortunately, we're going to start talking about another one. So, here we go. If that wasn't enough, these 3 things here, if these things were not enough, right, to upset the colonists, here are some more things happened, all right? So first of all, after all of these things, after the king said, no moving into the Ohio River Valley, after the colonists said, you know what, you're too far away, why do you care about what we do anyways? And then after the king gave them all of these taxes, then he said, you know what, we're going to enforce the Quartering Act. Okay, this forced the colonists to house British soldiers. Okay, so remember the British live across the ocean, right? So if you're a soldier from the British Army and you were in the colonies and maybe you were there to like make sure the colonists weren't getting too crazy and fighting back or anything, you're there to help the king keep things in order. If you were somebody who lived in the colonies and you were just a family and the king says, hey, let's say that your family, your last name, I'll just use a student from last year, the Hernandez family. Hey, Hernandez family, we know that you don't like me, the king, very much, and we know that some of the decisions that I've made have made you mad, but we have soldiers over there, and they are going to live with you. All right? You have to feed them. You have to give them beds. You have to make sure that they have clothes to stay warm in the winter and everything. And if you don't, well, guess what? They're going to arrest you. All right? So these families that lived in the colonies that were already upset with the king was saying, hey, you have to take care of my soldiers too. All right? So that was another thing that made the colonists super mad. Like, I can't imagine if somebody walked up to my door today and said, hey, the president says that I need to stay here. You need to house me. And so I know that you really like your bed and you like your apartment and your kitchen and stuff, but for the time being, for the next couple of months, that's mine. Sorry, go sleep on the couch. I'd be so mad. I'd be so mad. I would say, President, what are you doing? Get them out of my house. I pay for this house, right? That's the same exact thing that these colonists were saying when the king said, you have to take care of my soldiers. All right? Another thing that made the colonists very mad. Okay? We're going to talk about one more thing that made the colonists mad, and then we're going to just talk about one last thing before we wrap up for today. So, the last thing was the Tea Act. This forced the colonists to pay more for tea. Very easy. We talked about how this was something that happened in the Townsend Act too yesterday, that it put a tax on tea, more tax on tea. But the Tea Act was actually more than that. There was no reason for the king to do this. The colonists, like I said, from the Townsend Act, they were already putting more taxes on tea, and the colonists were paying for it. Right? Now, the Tea Act, the king pretty much did this just to prove to the colonists that, hey, guess what? We know that you're already paying more taxes on tea, but we're going to give you more tax because you can't do anything about it. Right? What are you going to do? You're going to fight us back? Right? And so the Tea Act was actually kind of the last straw. There was a lot of things that happened, a lot of bad things that happened the king did to the colonists. This was kind of the last one. All right? So, Boston Tea Party. Okay? Boston Tea Party. You probably have heard of this before. This is when the colonists took a ship full, I don't know if that's a word, a ship full of tea and dumped it into the ocean. All right, so after the Tea Act, after the king says, hey, guess what, you're going to have to pay more for tea, a ship came into the harbor in Boston, Massachusetts. That's still around today. If you've heard of the team, the New England Patriots, the football team, that's where they play, in Boston. The Boston Red Sox play there. Boston Bruins, if you're into hockey. Boston has a lot of really cool museums and plays, too. They have really good art scene. But the Boston Tea Party is when the colonists took a ship full of tea and dumped it into the ocean. Right? To protest, to say, you want to raise the taxes on tea? Here's what we think of your tea. And they dumped it into the ocean. Right? I'm sure that the fish got a really good taste of some tea that night, right? So we're going to look up a picture here. Boston Tea Party. Okay? Tons of pictures. A very important part of history for our country, the United States of America. The Boston Tea Party. You can grab any picture that you see here. I'm going to grab this one. Copy that image. Paste it. All right. And there we go. You can grab any picture that you want. And really what happened was, colonists were so upset, they dumped the tea in the ocean. All right? This really, 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 really made the king upset. Okay, so the king is getting mad about all of these things that the colonists are pushing back. They're saying, we hate these decisions that you're making. All right, so the British start to push back a little bit and start to get upset with the colonists because they're mad at the king, right? So this is when, after all these things happen, after the Boston Tea Party, this is when the Boston make sure I'm spelling it right here. Massacre happens. Okay, so the king gets mad. The British start to push back a little bit against the colonists. The colonists are like, "Why are you, taxing us, giving us all these ridiculous rules and things?" And they start, they threw the tea in the ocean. The king gets mad, pushes back. This is when the Boston Massacre happens. We'll talk about what the Boston Massacre was on Monday. All right, it was really the first battle of one of probably the most important war of United States history. Okay, the Boston Massacre. We'll talk about it on Monday. If you have any questions, you're with Miss V right now, so ask her and she will do her best to help you out. All right?